Schneider. Good. And you.
I wonder how that will sound to those just listening to the audio. Hello and welcome to the Football League Weekly, a weekly podcast looking into everything happening across the EFL. And we have plenty of news today. We'll briefly talk about England. Gareth Ainsworth, Chief Gareth Ainsworth, has joined Shrewsbury. And of course, we have updates on Coventry as well and who their potential new manager could be. And a quick clue, the thumbnail for this podcast is already very outdated. So there you go. There's a little spoiler for you. But Rhys, we both, well, personally, I hate the international break. I can't speak for you because I don't know how you feel about it. But it's the international break. We haven't got much football to talk about. How do you feel?
When it comes to the international break, I get just as excited as anyone else. When it's the Euros or when it's the World Cup, I absolutely love it. I always buy into the sort of fever. I find myself hooked. I find myself watching Paraguay against Ghana because it's a 12:30 kickoff on BBC and it's a day off and you're sat there watching it just for the sake of watching a game of football. The problem I have with the international break is the fact it's become A, so accumulated now, so it's become incredibly common, and B, we having pointless fixtures now. This whole Nations League, I don't know the format of it. I don't know how it all works. All I know is that we beat Greece the other night. I didn't watch it. We beat Greece the other night, and now we've got to face Ireland. And apparently, if we don't beat Ireland, then do we get relegated or are we in a different group? I've got absolutely no idea. But let's be honest, this whole Nations League is just a way for the football's big boys to be making more money.
So let's talk about something that the captain, Harry Kane, said. I don't know whether it was during the press conference or during an interview, but he said something along the lines of players should prioritise and want to play for their country over their club. So that caused a bit of a stir on social media, like it always would. What do you think, or what do you make of his comments?
I actually, having just said the Nations League is an absolute waste of time, I'm now going to, typical me, almost contradict what I've just said. When you're a young man and you're playing football in the park, and if you're lucky enough to get into academy, one thing that we all absolutely dream of is being able to pull on an England shirt or whatever nationality people may be listening to this podcast. To pull on your national team's colours and to go represent them on a football field is an absolute dream. And to have nine players pull out of the squad for the Nations League, it's almost embarrassing, really. And I actually find myself on the side of Harry Kane. I'm not saying that players should be 100% just for England, forget the club. There has to be a bit of respect for the club. Of course there has to be, and there has to be a divide within that. But the problem is a very select group of players are able or get the opportunity to represent their country at international level. Ben White is the one that's the real sort of stickler in the mud for me. Under Gareth Southgate, he wanted absolutely nothing to do with the England setup. And now we've got Thomas Tuchel in. He's come out from the dark and now really wants to be involved in the England team. For me, controversially, Ben, would you agree? Once you've snubbed the England team once, then you're out?
Yeah, because it was a bit like Danny Drinkwater a few years ago when he refused to play for the England team, which, in my opinion, technically ruined his legacy. Because what did he go on to do after that? He should really playing for England should really be an honour, and the players who do turn it down, they turned it down to represent another country, then fair enough, that is their choice to make. But if they just turn it down because they don't want to play for England, they'd prefer to play for their club, then in my opinion, and I'd be very interested to hear what people in the chat make of this, they should really just, I don't know, think about it again. I'm not going to say that you shouldn't call them up because I think Ben White would be a brilliant player for England, but I just kind of think that it looks bad on them. And at the end of the day, look, I'm not that patriotic person at all, really. But playing for your international club adds something to your career. It should be like a highlight of your career, playing for England or playing for whatever country you want to represent. And the fact that some players don't want to do so is a little bit baffling, really. If you're very injury prone, then fair enough. But that should be the clubs to really call them out. But if you're not, then yeah. But let's talk about, because we have plenty to talk about this week, Rhys. Let's start with something that's been happening in the Premier League. And again, we won't go on for too long about it because this is an EFL show. But David Coote, normally I pull up little videos and things like that to show you whenever we're talking about news articles or things like that. I won't do that about David Coote just because I think we need to handle this one sensitively, especially given how we are talking about the world of social media and how his personal life has literally been plastered everywhere. Basically, David Coote was caught saying some, I don't want to say unsavoury because I completely agreed with what he said, but with some silly things on social media about Liverpool and Jurgen Klopp. And to make matters worse, the same guy that, let's be honest, snaked on him, leaked footage of him snorting a bit of Charlie as well. So first of all, what are your thoughts on this? Because in my opinion, I just feel bad for him because referees don't get drug tested. We all make mistakes in life. I'm not normalizing anything that he's done, but we live in the world of social media now where everybody gets cancelled, mostly for the right, in my opinion, but in this one, maybe on the wrong a little bit. So where do you kind of stray on this debate?
First and foremost, if anyone is naive enough to think that all referees don't have this sort of conversations away from a camera, then it's delusion, to be honest. That, these conversations happen, I'm pretty sure, every day almost, or pretty much every day behind closed doors. The mistake that he's fell into is that he's allowed himself to be recorded, and it's a bit of a shitty friend, to be honest, to leak it for a bit of money towards the Sun newspaper. When you look at what David Coote was referring to, it was referring back to when we're back in COVID days. I think it was the Brighton away game. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was away at Brighton. And in the aftermath of the game, when the referee blew the full-time whistle, Jurgen Klopp did get extremely aggressive. So you can't really blame David Coote for forming that opinion. Let's not blow out of proportion, though. He hasn't said anywhere in that video that there's any bias. He hasn't shown anywhere in that video that he wouldn't referee a Liverpool game fairly. I don't see why this should affect his career in any way, shape, or form. Okay, realistically, he shouldn't referee another Liverpool game. I can understand that to a certain extent, and I think that would be fair. But realistically, I don't see how it should destroy his career. There's calls out online saying that he should be sacked and everything he's worked for should be stripped. Would we be having the same conversation if it was about a different club? If it was about Manchester United, would we be sat here and everything be up in the air as much as it is? If it was with respect to a smaller Premier League club, if it was to ourselves, let's not offend any Premier League fans. Let's say it was David Coote. Let's say David Coote came out and said, I can't stand Ipswich, McKenna's overrated, blah, 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 blah. No one in the Premier League would bat an eyelid, would they? It's an opinion. And I know the second video when it came out of him using some powder was stupid, look, and I can't obviously defend that if it proves to be true. But what sort of amused me in a way, if that's the right word, is that he's trying to claim it was AI and it wasn't actually him saying those things.
And then he later came out and admitted that it was him, which was even better. But good evening to everybody else in the chat as well. Feel free to ask your questions, which will be read out at the very end of the show. Let's go on to the main topic of the show, because There's been a lot going on at Coventry, which we have covered in a lot of detail in the last couple of weeks. We were both under the impression, Rhys, that Frank Lampard was going to get the job. He had gone for a tour around the stadium. He had, well, basically the media, more or less, already confirmed that he was going to be the manager. But in the last 24 hours, in fact, maybe even shorter than that, because we already made the thumbnail for this video. We already made the title for this video, kind of like insinuating that Frank Lampard was going to be the new manager. Ruud van Nistelrooy, who, as you all know, was interim at Manchester United. He is now the favourite to take over the job. He recently applied for it. SkyBet have him as the favourite to take over the job. So, I mean, I guess we could have a very similar debate to the one that we had last week. Ruud van Nistelrooy potentially going to Coventry United. What do you make of that? Him or Frank Lampard?
Oh, that's a question and a half. And I'm going to say a different answer because we sort of discussed this before we went live. I've actually changed my mind. Is that allowed? I'm going to talk myself into Frank Lampard's corner here and hear me out. The reason why I wouldn't go for someone like Van Nistelrooy, I think with his sort of coaching career, he is very much still very raw as a coach. I think Lampard, don't get me wrong, Frank Lampard is no world beater. He's not going to go in and transform this club into a top six pushing club straight away. He hasn't got a magic wand, and I'm not saying he's going to come in and perform miracles, but I'd be leaning towards Frank Lampard. Obviously, there was that photo. I don't know if people in the chat have seen it, the one I'm going to refer to. There was a photo that a fan took with Frank Lampard, and it appeared to be a Coventry City shirt in his left hand. But look, that's speculation. The problem is that would you say, we look back at Frank Lampard's career, that his career matches the job of a Coventry City? That's where I have the problem, because you look at Derby and his whole sort of Derby sort of tenure is overshadowed by that playoff final by not starting a striker. You look at Chelsea, his sort of proper spell at Chelsea, not the interim towards the end of the 2023 season, but when he had a good couple of years at Chelsea. And that there is where he's earned his sort of merit for me. That's where he's earned his credit, because he worked with that huge sort of transfer ban sort of looming on the whole club and looming over what he could and couldn't do. He worked with incredible youth players. You've got to look at the likes of Mason Mount, Rhys James. You've got to look at Mark Gahey, who's now doing absolutely fantastic at Crystal Palace. That all came from the work that Frank Lampard was doing, let's not forget. I know you can look at the Everton period, and look, we've got to look back at the Everton period as a bit of a disaster, really. It was poor, but then you got to think with Everton that there's a lot of problems at board level and above. It's not a club that you go into and everything sort of work out in your favour. But you look at what Frank Lampard has already achieved, got Chelsea to the FA Cup, runners up into the final. There is credit, or I'll be more confident backing a Frank Lampard than what I would a Ruud van Nistelrooy. And as we're live, we had this debate a couple of weeks ago. If you are Doug King, would you go Frank Lampard or Steven Gerrard?
Oh, I would Frank Lampard just because of
what
he's already
I meant Wayne Rooney.
Or Wayne Rooney.
I meant Wayne Rooney,
yeah. I don't know. Because I wouldn't go for either of them, which is why I couldn't necessarily give you a definitive answer. Because Wayne Rooney, I think he's perfect at Plymouth at the moment, because he's gotten them playing some kind of football and he's found some kind of form, albeit inconsistent form there. And Frank Lampard, I just don't necessarily rate him as a manager anyway. At Everton, I think things were out of his hands due to the owner. And when he was at Derby, he did make plenty of mistakes, which he did hopefully learn from, especially the playoff final, which I think we can all remember. But it's difficult. I don't like any of them, but I'd take Lampard over Rooney, because Lampard has managed in the Premier League. He's got some experience in the Championship as well with clubs who were performing well. We can look back at what he did at Derby and how he developed some of the youngsters who were on loan at the club, the likes of Mason Mount. So I'd have to go for Lampard, to be honest, Rhys.
Yeah, so within that, and sort of sticking on the Coventry sort of debate, everyone in the chat get involved. The question about to pose to yourself, Ben. Let's imagine you're sort of Doug King and you had a sort of crystal sort of ball. knowing the options that are now out there, knowing who the favourites are for the vacancy, would you still have got rid of Mark Robins, knowing this is the market you'd be fighting in?
No, because I think it's absolutely ridiculous that. And I went on a massive rant about this last week about how they let go of Mark Robins. You let go of a manager who was revered by the club. They absolutely loved him. He was a legend at Coventry. He developed all of the young players there. He brought in some brilliant free signings, some brilliant signings from abroad as well. And then you more or less just push him out really without any real thank you. And bring in somebody like Lampard or maybe Van Nistelrooy, who basically will cause you to go back to step one again, where they will have to kind of like implement their own philosophy, their own way of playing, and you'll have to rebuild the project all over again. One of the biggest cliches that you'll ever hear in football is Rome wasn't built in a day. And I think that was very much the case with Mark Robins. I know he had been there for a while, but if we look back to last season, they got to the FA Cup semi-final. I would argue that after last season and the season they had before, where they got knocked out of the playoff final thanks to a Fankety Dabo missed penalty, they probably have a bit of a hangover this season. They probably had a bit of a hangover. So you can't necessarily blame Coventry for struggling. I think it's absolutely ridiculous, to be fair, and I think I'm just repeating the same rant that I had last week. But again, Van Nistelrooy, just so I can get my opinion out there real quickly, I'll take Van Nistelrooy over Lampard, but I don't know, both I wouldn't take any of them, to be fair. So let's move on as well. I'm just quickly reading the chat as well. Good evening to everybody who has joined us. A long way to go. Will Coventry City go down? Rhys, will Coventry City, and I know it's rather premature to be talking about this, but could Coventry City go down?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot here. That is, it's difficult, and I'm gonna sit on the fence. I know it doesn't make for the most entertaining of sort of answer, but you look at the sort of bottom three in which you've got sort of Cardiff, Portsmouth, and QPR sort of out there at the moment. Cardiff having a sort of tough time at the moment under Omar Risa, but I think I've seen enough from him, at least in his interim, to show that he can get results now until they get a permanent sort of manager in there. Portsmouth are a team that I've discussed on the show previous that I really like Portsmouth. I think as a club, I think John Mousinho, after the 3-1 win against Preston, I think now they're starting to build that sort of momentum now. What I'm saying in a sort of long way around, I mean, QPR, I think, are a worse side than them. Their sides underneath Coventry City that I think are simply inferior. I think their sides there that are definitely sort of closer to the relegation sort of threat than what Coventry City are. I think in this sort of unique situation, you've got to ignore the fact that Coventry are only a point off the sort of bottom three, and you've got to look at it more of a sort of whole situation. You look at players that Coventry City have, and you compare that to the likes of Plymouth Argyle, which, with respect, I don't think they're really comparable. I think Coventry's squad, as an established championship squad, is sort of leaps and bounds ahead of Plymouth Argyle. I think that, and look, we could have this debate about Luton Town every single week, but, the result against Middlesbrough, the 5-1 defeat, is something I think has actually probably put the final nail in the coffin for Rob Edwards and his tenure there. And if he does stay, which is looking likely, let's be honest, because I think that if he was going to go, they'd have sacked him at the start of the international break. So I think Rob Edwards is going to stay. And for as long as Rob Edwards does stay, I can't see Luton progressing up the table. I think Coventry are in a better position than Luton. Hull City are a team that we're going to talk about later in a little bit more detail. But I think Coventry are in a better position than Hull City as well. I think there's too many sort of weaker sides underneath Coventry City for me to be convinced that they're going to go down. So I think you have to ignore the sort of you have to ignore the sort of point tallies. I think even teams above Coventry City, the likes of Oxford, I think, don't have the same sort of caliber within their squad like Coventry City do. I think Sheffield Wednesday are another team that I think do have a weaker squad when compared to Coventry. So I don't think that Coventry are in danger of going down. Famous last words. Don't clip that up. But I do think Coventry, if they get this appointment right, I'll put that caveat on it. If they get this appointment right, then I do think that they should survive. But a name I was surprised to see linked with the job might be a little bit sort of past its expiration date now. I haven't checked the odds. But a name we actually missed last week. Did you see that Matt Bloomfield was linked to the vacancy?
Yeah, because at the moment I have the betting odds right there on my screen. He's fourth favourite to take over. Lee Carsley is actually second favourite at the moment. Above Frank Lampard, he is 9-4. But Matt Bloomfield, he's 12-1 to take over at Coventry. I'm surprised, by the way, to hear about Lee Carsley being second favourite.
Yeah, that sort of shocked me, to be honest, because obviously when he was sort of England interim coach, we were sort of told through his press conferences that he was really, really happy sort of building within the sort of England setup. He was really happy working with the young players at England, and he was really sort of comfortable. So I think this link has sort of come out of nowhere, to be honest, and I don't get where it's come from. It's Matt Bloomfield, controversially, I think would be a backward step for Coventry. I wouldn't say that when you sack a fantastic coach who's done so much for you in Mark Robbins, I don't think that a coach who, don't get me wrong, he's done fantastic at Wycombe. I shouldn't, put any disrespect on that. He's done fantastic at Wycombe. I think it's a backstep within the fact that if you're looking to push this squad to the next step, which was something quite evident from the statement when he did sack Mark Robbins, are you going to trust a manager that's been managing in League One to push you onto that next step? But also from Matt Bloomfield's point of view, you got a really good project going at Wycombe Wanderers. You've got the players playing the way you want to. It's a huge risk to go to a Coventry City side, which, as we speak right now, are in a better position than Wycombe Wanderers. I do think that if I was given the option of the two, if I'm Matt Bloomfield sitting here now, I'm saying at Wycombe, I wouldn't even be entertaining the Coventry job.
Yeah, and again, it should be a very interesting. It should be interesting to see what the developments are like and where they are in the next couple of weeks as well. But let's quickly talk about some of the teams that are struggling in the Championship. We've only really got one main news story for League One and League Two, so we'll stick onto the Championship for a little while longer. Hull at the moment, they are struggling. Tim Volta, when he first came in, I was very excited to see how he had performed there because he had a very good reputation at the last job he had been at in playing brilliant attacking football. But Hull, they're 19th at the moment in their Championship. In their last game, they lost 2-1 against West Bromwich Albion, which ironically was West Brom's first win in something like 7 games or something ridiculous like that. So Tim Volta's Hull City, what do you make of them? And look, we're approaching a time of season where managers are starting to be let go. So how much credit do you think he has left in the bank? And do you reckon he's in danger of being sacked?
What I would say is that if he does get sacked within the next sort of couple of weeks, I think it goes to show how little sort of thought was put into the Tim Volta appointment in the first place. Me and you sat down when the link sort of first appeared, and we sat down and we went, right, okay, we don't know much about Tim Volta. We're not going to lie, and say we're experts on him. But he looked back at results and done a bit of analysis from his time in Germany. And one thing that was apparent was the fact that his teams concede a lot of goals and they score a lot of goals. So should we really be worried or I'll change that. Should we really be surprised by the way and the manner in which they've started? You look back at the previous results and you have to go back a fair while for their first win. Last win was a 3-1 win against QPR at Loftus Road. But even within that time, they're not beating the teams that they should be beating. With respect, when you're a Hull City side and you've sacked Liam Rossignol, who had you around the sort of top 6, had you in and within the mix, had people talking about Hull City. When you let him go, the manager that you bring in has to bring in results pretty much straight away. And they have to continue that sort of train of momentum and keep the team sort of performing at that level in which they were. But he simply hasn't. You look back at the recent form, and I'm not saying these are easy games. Derby away, Portsmouth at home, Oxford away. That run of 3, which they only got 2 points from, 2 draws. They lost to Oxford. They drew against Derby and Portsmouth. That run of 3 games, Derby, Portsmouth, Oxford, for a side that is struggling in the Championship this season, You're looking at those 3 fixtures and you're thinking, that's a really good opportunity. That's a good chance to get some momentum behind us and really sort of push on and try to sort of make a season a bit of a success and remember it for the right reasons. You even think after that, you look at West Brom and the poor form that they've been in. Obviously, entertaining a West Brom side under Carlos Corberán is never easy. And despite their sort of lack of form recently and their lack of goals at West Brom have been scoring, we knew they'd have to turn it around eventually. But you look at that game and you go, this is a West Brom side who are low on confidence. They're there for the taking. And you, again, haven't capitalised on the opportunity that they've had presented to them. You're looking for a good run of form this season, and it's tough to find one. They've only won sort of... they've won 3 games in a sort of row. Stoke away, Cardiff home, QPR away. That's the only really positive from the sort of season if you are Hull City. And they have had some injury bad luck. You look at Bloomy, who looks to be out, I think, for the season or so. But the next 3 games, I think, for Hull are absolutely huge. Luton away, Sheffield Wednesday at home, Middlesbrough away.
And let's talk about Luton as well, because Rob Edwards is under a world of pressure there. My Luton mate, who I talk to on a regular basis about Luton, he is adamant that they should sack Rob Edwards. And he keeps saying how they only made it to the Premier League because of the work Nathan Jones did before. So I think Rob Edwards deserves a little more credit than that. But what do you make of how Rob Edwards has been doing so far, and how much more time has he got there?
Yeah, I touched on that earlier when I mentioned the result against Middlesbrough, the 5-1 defeat, and I'm going to stick by that. I think that is the final nail in the coffin for Rob Edwards at Luton Town. I think you look at where they are, and this is a classic case of the players that he put out to line up are more than good enough to be 21st in this division. That squad on paper should be a squad challenging for the top 6 at a bare minimum. This is a classic example of players letting the manager down. This is a classic example of players not playing for the manager. Has Rob Edwards perhaps lost the dressing room? Maybe. Perhaps that's an argument to be had. And if in a live chat, let me know below. But are they suffering perhaps a bit of a Premier League sort of hangover? It's when they were in the Premier League, they weren't sort of beaten boys. They weren't getting beat sort of emphatically every week. They were in games. They were looking really, really good. But there's almost been a sort of switch at Luton Town where they just can't seem to get any sort of momentum behind them. You look at this sort of form, and it's really, to put it straight, it's kind of depressing. You look at where they are in a league, no one would have had them down to be relegation candidates. And the worrying thing for me now, if I am a Luton Town fan, is that relegation is now seeming like a real sort of strong possibility, because ignore QPR, because I think, actually, is that fair? QPR under Cifuentes so far haven't really shown much, have they? Let's put it really sort of straight. Portsmouth are now starting to get there, and Cardiff under Omar Risa, as I previously said, have been showing some very good signs as well. So if Luton aren't careful, they're going to end up in that bottom 3. And as we all know, once you get into that bottom 3, it's incredibly hard to break out from it. And realistically, if they were going to sack Rob Edwards, well, they should have done it at the start of this international break. If they're going to sack him next week, what's almost the point? I almost think that if you don't sack Rob Edwards within this international break, you have to give him January.
So let's move on to League One, because we have an absolutely huge news topic to talk about. First of all, let's play a game of Guess the Manager. Rhys, who is this?
That's Sting from WWE, isn't it?
Well, no, actually, it's Gareth Ainsworth doing a Facebook Live for QPR, dressed as a member of Kiss or Sting from WWE/WCW. We are talking about that beautiful man, Gareth Ainsworth. He is manager of Shrewsbury Town. So, look, he doesn't really need any introduction. Legendary manager at Wycombe, did an absolutely brilliant job there. Went to Queen's Park Rangers, turned into the David Brent of the Football League, where he brought hacker people into the dressing room to do the hacker with the players. He was very amusing there, but he didn't actually do that well. So Gareth Ainsworth to Shrewsbury. I'll give you some of the details on how long he's been given there, as in the contracts. But to begin with, what do you make of Gareth Ainsworth's move to Shrewsbury Town?
I don't want to constantly sit here and be negative, but it's not an appointment that really excites me. It's not an appointment that gets me going, oh, he's going to get Shrewsbury out with this fight. He's going to drag them and absolutely elevate them into the next level. It's quite a sort of mediocre appointment. And when I read it again, I wasn't excited by it. 51-year-old's been out of the game now for just over a year. You can look back at the spell he had at Wycombe, the decade at Wycombe, realistically done okay, got them promoted into the Championship in 2020. But realistically for me, you look at that QPR spell, underwhelming really isn't the right word to use, I think, at QPR. And it speaks volumes about a manager's sort of impact at a club when, if you tell me Ainsworth QPR, I think straight back to that video that you played right at the start of the show.
So the 51-year-old is joined by his long-term assistant manager, Richard Dobson, who has also obviously joined the club. And Shrewsbury Town's director, Mickey Moore, revealed he and Ainsworth have a long-standing relationship and that he was their number one target from the outset. So with that in mind and the relationship that the owner has with Gareth Ainsworth, I don't know if Mickey Moore's the owner. I probably need fact checking on that. But what do you make of his appointment based on that? Do you reckon that they actually have a long-term project in mind here? Because if they wanted him for a long time, then maybe they couldn't have been happier to let go of Paul Hurst.
When we talk about sort of long-term projects in football and bringing a manager in for a long term, surely you bring him in at the start of pre-season, or ideally before pre-season, so you give him an actual proper time to get to know the squad and to get to know the players. I remember saying when we were talking about Paul Hurst being sacked, I remember sat here saying that given the position in which Shrewsbury Town are in, now rock bottom of the league, 6 points cut adrift, they need a manager that's going to be able to go in there straight away, demand respect straight away, pull this squad up who are going to be absolutely shot on confidence and get them believing again. Gareth Ainsworth ticks about 0 of those boxes. He doesn't do any of that for me. He doesn't excite me. If I'm there, if I'm sitting in that dressing room at Shrewsbury, I see him walk through the door. I think it's almost a bit of a joke. And I don't know if that's me being too harsh because, again, Gareth Ainsworth's sort of name, his reputation will now always be associated to that stupid dancing video in QPR, in the board meeting in QPR. And he's gone into an absolute baptism of fire. If you look at Shrewsbury's, or his first 3 games at Shrewsbury, Birmingham at home, Blackpool home, Cambridge away, that Cambridge away is an absolute huge game. Like I said, they're practically cut away at the bottom of the league. The club have just lost to Burton Albion. Yes, Burton Albion have actually won a game of football. They've lost to Burton Albion. They're sat at the bottom of League One. Is Gareth Ainsworth really the sort of guy to pull you out of a relegation dogfight? I think I'd be more excited if he went to a sort of mid-table League One club. If Gareth Ainsworth went to a Peterborough, to a Northampton, Exeter, that sort of club where relegation isn't much of a concern, where you can actually build something because you haven't got that threat of relegation. You're more freer within your role as a coach. I'll be more excited about a mid-table opportunity because he can go in and put his own ideas within that. I'm not at all excited with the idea of him being able to pull Shrewsbury out of this fight. And to be honest, having now known they've gone for Gareth Ainsworth, is it mad to say, with hindsight, I would have stuck with Paul Hurst?
I disagree. I was made for loving you, Shrewsbury, and you were made for loving me. Take that awful pun as you will, because I had no idea where to go after that, but I just had to show that image as it was absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, I don't mind Gareth Ainsworth. I think he's a good manager, especially for a smaller club like Shrewsbury. He hasn't got the resources that he necessarily had. I know, look, Wycombe didn't have a lot of resources as well. So, I would feel a little ridiculous by saying that or stating that he had plenty of resources there. But Wycombe were a solid mid-table / playoff League One club. And Of course, he got them to the Championship as well on multiple occasions. So he had a fair bit of resources there for a League One club. Shrewsbury haven't got many resources at all. So, I wonder how he will perform at a club that hasn't got a lot of resources at all. So, let's quickly, because there really isn't a lot of news to talk about tonight. We will move on to the questions in a little bit. So get your questions in if you want us to talk about a football club that we haven't spoken about in a few weeks. If you want your questions answered, let's quickly talk about, because this wasn't originally on the docket for tonight, but Morecambe boss Derek Adams has said that he is hopeful that a conclusion can be reached over their ownership. And that is because a fan protest is set to happen this weekend at their stadium. So first of all, the situation at Morecambe and how messy it's been. How important is it? Because we've spoken about this in the past with Reading and how poor their ownership has obviously been there with De Jong. What do you make of Morecambe's current ownership issues?
To be honest, I think it's extremely sad. I think that the EFL sort of fit and proper ownership test has yet again shown itself to be about as useful as a chocolate teapot. I think that it's wrong that fans are being sort of dragged through the ringers with these owners who simply couldn't give two hoots. And when it comes to sort of protests and when it comes to sort of making fans' voices heard, I'm all for it. I absolutely think it's 100% the right thing to do, on the caveat or on the condition that it's done a sort of peacefully, so no sort of smashing stadiums up or setting light to anything or anything stupid like that. And as long as it's sort of done within that manner, I'm all for protests. I'm all for getting fans' voices out there, because as we all learned from the COVID season, or not necessarily what we all learned, but what I would hope the likes of the FA, the EFL, the Premier League, UEFA, I hope what they would have known is that football was nothing without us loyal fans sort of attending week in, week out, without us fans buying shirts from the club, without us fans supporting our club. Football was simply nothing. And it's sad to see yet another club now being put through the ringer, Morecambe under Jason Whittingham, who are just being put through absolutely 50 shades of crap simply because he can. And the problem is that I'm not going to read too much into, and tell me if I'm being harsh, I'm not going to read too much into the fact he's hopeful of selling the club. The reason why I say that is because we've been down this road about 101 different times with De Jong at Reading. We've been told, oh, we're hopeful of a new buyer, or he's coming in for meetings, things are progressing really nicely, and then nothing actually happens. It's almost as if it's like a sticking plaster. It's almost as if owners can come out and say these things simply to cover the cracks, or to buy them some time, to buy them a couple of weeks, to keep fans off the backs. So I wouldn't read too much into sort of him saying, look, I'm actively looking to sell the club, because I believe that as an owner, if you had the intention to sell the club, or in your mind, if you thought, okay, I've probably had enough now, it's not for me anymore, you'd looked for an owner way, way, way before this came to the public eye.
Yeah, and I agree. And it's funny because news has actually broken in the last couple of hours that, according to Jason Whittingham in an interview with ITV Granada, he has agreed terms to sell the club. Now, there isn't much information on who he's allegedly selling to, or kind of like what the plans are in regards to kind of like the takeover, if you will. But I guess you just kind of like answered your this question just then. But real quickly, I guess you're probably going to be repeating what you just said. But if it does go through, wouldn't that be amazing? And do you reckon it will go through?
Look, it would be amazing for Morecambe. Excuse me. It would really be amazing for Morecambe. I think you look at where they are on the league table as well. They're still well within that sort of relegation dogfight. They've still got a massive chance, really, in sort of staying up. And this sort of momentum that could be created off the pitch could be the sort of catalyst, or could light the fire to their season sort of turning around. We all know the effects of, of a momentum shift, or something positive happening. So, look, I'd be positive as a Morecambe fan, but I wouldn't be sat here getting my hopes up. I wouldn't be sat here going, okay, this is the end of the turmoil. We've got our club back. We're on, to do mad things. We're going to go race through the divisions. I wouldn't be getting ahead of myself. Like I say, I think a lot of the time these statements come out simply to cover the cracks, simply to buy a couple of weeks or to buy a month or to buy some time where they sort of get faded out into the background a little bit and people start to forget about sort of situations. Because I think realistically, as soon as an owner or an investor or an owner, as soon as they're interested, it should be made public. And I don't really understand why there needs to be all these periods of exclusivity.
Yeah, I agree. And it's one of those things where I'll believe it when I see it. So unfortunately, we live in a world of football ownership where that very much is the case for most situations like this. But let's go on to the questions. Apologies if this is a very short show. There's a reason why we don't like the international break. There's barely anything to talk about when England are playing their glorified friendlies in the Nations League. I'm just going to quickly read through the chat. Whilst I am reading through, Paul asks, Stockport v Wrexham, is it going to live up to the hype tomorrow? So whilst I'm reading through the chat, will the game live up to the hype tomorrow?
No. It is the sort of straight answer. I don't think it necessarily will, but I don't want to be sort of too negative. I think the one time that I really got excited to sort of watch Wrexham, I think it was when they were playing Birmingham City at home. It was Birmingham against Wrexham. I got myself really pumped for it. I thought, this is two clubs with big aspirations of sort of pushing on towards the top end of League One. It's going to be an absolutely fantastic game. I think it's a good game to have it in the terms of where both clubs have come from. I think, for the biased side of me, you're obviously going to stick with Stockport. I think Stockport can get the win over Wrexham. I look at Stockport squad. I'm really excited by it. I like the likes of Louis Barry, who I'm a big fan of. Isaac Lafay up front is a great option as well. And you pick up these individual players. Quick debate for the chat and a quick question for you as well, Ben. Paul Mullen, Wrexham striker, has he even found out at League One?
How old is he now? Because he has to be about 30, if not 29.
32. I think 32.
He's 32. Look, age catches up with you, but when you're in League One, I don't necessarily think age is a massive factor, because we've seen with the likes of David McGoldrick in the past, Leon Clark, where they've kind of still been scoring in their mid-30s. I don't think so. I just think he's been going through a little bit of a difficult spell in form. But with Wrexham, they have the money and the kind of facilities to bring in a better striker. Whether that's a real statement signing or a massive name for the division, who knows? But I'm interested actually to see whether they do bring anybody in January, because Fletcher is currently out injured, so he's going to be out for a little while now. It wouldn't surprise me at all if they did bring in somebody new. So Samuel Boggs, are you guys going to do any more National League videos? Shame David wasn't on to offer an insight on Rochdale on the other one you did. Yeah, we would love to do another National League video. And David, he is somebody who hopefully we're going to get on soon, because I would absolutely love to have him back onto the show that Dave made. So I can't wait to eventually have him back on. And whilst we are on that topic, I will be going away soon. I'll be leaving the show, you lucky people. I'm not leaving. I'll be going on holiday for about 3 weeks. So we will be handing the show to the very capable hands of Rhys. Look, I still need to introduce him to the software that we use to record the podcast. So next week, I'm sure he'll take over the reins with the software that we're using. But yeah, I will be away for about 3 weeks. So yeah, the show will look slightly different. It will be a lot more professional, I'm sure, than the way I've kind of gone about producing the show and anything like that. But I will be back soon. Make the most of me not being here, because it won't be very common that you won't hear my voice on the show. I'm sure some people are absolutely loving the thought of me being away for 3 weeks. But yeah, see you after that, I guess. I will be on next week's show, don't worry. So yeah, and we will. Back to the original question. have another video on the National League eventually, and some guests as well. We do have a couple of exciting guests as well coming up, former footballers, maybe podcasters, maybe. I'll let you know in the near future. Ballum, your thoughts on David Coote? Yeah, we answered that at the very beginning of the show, so go back to about 5 minutes into the video to hear our thoughts on that. I see Shrewsbury Town getting relegated as 4 teams have to go down. Rhys, do you see Strawberry Town getting relegated?
Yeah, I see Shrewsbury Town. I think Grapes United might also be in trouble. Maybe Raspberry Albion as well. I shouldn't.
Very clever. Or shall the sound effects for that?
I do think Shrewsbury look they're in absolute worlds of trouble, and I talked about it when we talked about sort of Gareth Ainsworth and the original sort of link. I wouldn't be trusting Gareth Ainsworth. I don't think he's a character that ticks enough of the profile sort of boxes for me, that has the ability to be able to drag a side sort of out of the sort of mess in which Shrewsbury are actually in. And I don't think that when you go into the Shrewsbury side, you're going to need characteristics that when you walk into that dressing room, you demand respect. You demand that players start to turn up. They start to give more of an effort. They show the right side, the right sort of sign to pull themselves out of this sort of battle. The problem is that it's that first game. And after that game, when they do lose that game, famous last words, when they do lose that game, that gap could be even more. And it puts huge pressure on that Blackpool away, which is a very difficult, also Blackpool at home, sorry, which is a very difficult team to face, which then makes Cambridge away realistically a must-win game, which to have that sort of pressure so early on in your tenure, I just don't think Ainsworth is cut out for it.
And Ballum asks, are you leaving Twitter? Are we leaving? I'm going to have to reread that. Dyslexia. Are you leaving Twitter? And will you be joining, I guess, Blue Sky? So first of all, we are on Blue Sky, first of all. I was going to cover that in the plugs at the very end. I have made a Blue Sky account for Over the Bars Football League Weekly. But I don't understand this new app because I don't see how long it will last for and whether it will become popular. It looks like the absolute same thing that Twitter is at the moment. So will you be leaving to the other app, Rhys?
No, it's not for me. I think if it suddenly sort of blows up and it turns into something amazing and superb, and it's worlds away from Twitter, then possibly I'll think about it. But for me, I was having a conversation. I can't remember who I was having a conversation with. It may have been Ballum actually. Ballum may have PM'd me and had this conversation, and I was saying the problem is with Twitter, it's not X, it's Twitter. We can sit here and we can sort of pull plugs out. We can go, okay, this isn't right, or this annoys me, or that frustrates me, or this needs to be looked at. That's a bug. Sometimes it's better the devil you know. And for me, okay, Twitter has its faults, but it works, And to me, to ditch it and to go onto Blue Sky, an app I know absolutely nothing about, it's not for me.
And will Bristol and Preston end up around 12th again? So Bristol and Preston, I don't think they're doing too badly this season under Liam Manning and Paul Heckingbottom, but do you reckon they'll finish around mid-table again?
I'm glad someone mentioned Bristol City, because that's always a glass or a bottle. Liam Manning has ended this
awesome coke, not the coke that David Coote's into, but I know, low blow. I'll edit that out of the Apple podcast. One, don't worry.
The Norwich home streak has ended.
I feel bad. Sorry about that, David.
So I guess that rules out David Coote ever coming on this podcast then.
Yeah, I mean, now it's Accrington Stanley's owner who he can't have on after all the hate I've given him, Andy Holt and David Coote as well. So welcome to the Over the Bars sin bin, which is what we're going to call it. The list of people who we can't have on the show. So it's another grog list, don't worry.
So Bristol City, for me, they're a team that, and very just to get everyone's opinion, to be fair, in a live chat where we've got 5 minutes to talk about them, they're a team that after the sort of transfer window in the summer that they had, and the fact they brought in Liam Manning, who I rate as a really sort of high young coach, I think he's going to go on and do really, really good things. I had really high hopes of Bristol City coming into this season. I thought, they might be able to sort of do what sort of Watford are doing this season, in the fact that they may be able to be the outside. They may be able to sort of push in towards the sort of top 6, maybe sort of sneak that 6th position, show signs of improvement, maybe sneak into that sort of playoff spots. But for me, it's typical Bristol City in the fact that it's so up and down. I was sort of thinking towards the start of the season, sort of from how much transfer, when I was thinking Bristol City are going to be the team to keep an eye on this year. They're going to be a team that are really going to sort of excite us from a neutral point of view, and they're going to be the dark horses to come out of nowhere. I know they're only 3 points off the playoffs, but they've not really done anything to sort of excite me. And I'll probably, to be honest, put the same sort of bracket in at Preston North End, in the fact that I think that, again, unless they hit a miraculous sort of turn in form around, I think that come the next game week in a couple of weeks, I think Preston could find themselves within the bottom 3, which I think would be huge, to be honest, because I don't think, again, anyone had Preston down to sort of be a relegation candidate. But I think the longer the season goes on, the more trouble they are in.
And finally, the biggest and most important question of all, just to end the show on, what is our favourite kind of cheese? So you go first, Rhys. So what is your favourite kind of cheese?
Now, if you know me, I have cheese on absolutely everything, right? I have it on everything. And bear with me here, because this is going to sound extremely weird, but this is the way the podcast has gone now. We've gone that sort of dark alley. Is it weird to have cheese in a roast dinner? Is that weird?
Yes, really weird.
Thanks, mate.
Freakish behaviour.
You know that you go into like again, this shows how basic I am, but you go into I do a sort of 4-spice sort of grated cheese. That, to me, I could eat that with a spoon, mate. I could eat that with a spoon and just sit there. Mate, come on. You can't tell me that isn't chef's kiss. That's beautiful.
And thank you very much for watching the show today. We are finished. We're not carrying on from there. We'll see you all next week. Yeah, that is... Cheese grosses me out. I don't mind mozzarella, but my ick, if you will, is cheese. Mozzarella is brilliant, but so it goes back to when I was in college and I did sports journalism. There was this guy who would go into every lecture I was in with a massive block of cheddar cheese, and then sit right next to me with this block of cheddar cheese and just eat it with a knife. And ever since then, I haven't been able to look at cheese. I have a phobia of cheese. So that is kind of my one ick. And I don't know whether my internet cut out then. Apologies if it did. You probably missed half the story. But yeah, that is why I can't stand cheese. But yeah, carry on with your weird cheese anecdotes.
Does it get weirder than roast dinner? Because to me, that's normal. To me, that's sort of basic. It goes into a potato, you sort of fry it off, so it gets nice and sort of crispy and sort of all soaks in. That to me is normal.
Mozzarella in a curry, though. Have you ever had mozzarella cheese in a curry?
How can you be coming at me for cheese in a roast dinner, mate, when you're having it with curry? Come on,
exactly.
Man.
So I take that all back, because I always put mozzarella in a homemade curry, which is absolutely brilliant. I definitely recommend that. The only cheese that I like. So yeah. God, that probably sounds worse, actually, doesn't it?
It sounds a lot worse, mate. Yeah.
So yeah, if you are watching this, and thank you very much for joining us here tonight, then give us what your favourite cheese is in the chat. And Rhys, we are going to wrap up the show now. Where can people find you on Twitter?
They find me on Twitter. It's at RhysCurtis14.
And I always mess up on the plug, so I'll probably mess up on it again. But you can find Over the Bar on Twitter. We are at Over the Bar FB. You can find us on Blue Sky. I think that's what it's called. We are Over the Bar's Football League Weekly on there. So follow us. We don't post a lot on there, but we do kind of like post updates on the show and small little video clips like we do for our Twitter as well. And we are also on TikTok, again, at Over the Bars Football League Weekly, where you can get early previews for the show if we pre-recorded it. And you can get other small exclusive, I guess, content as well. So that is where you can find us on social media. You can listen to us on all good streaming services. We are on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, we're going to be on Amazon real soon. I don't know who uses Amazon, but if you use Amazon, then fair enough. So yeah, don't forget to type in OTB's Football League Weekly onto there as well, if you want to listen to our show on demand and on your way to work as well. I can't think of a better way to start your morning. And for me, you can find me on Twitter at OTB_Benjamin. We really appreciate every single one of you who joins us week in and week out. We will be live again next week. I know last week we confused a few people because we uploaded a pre-recorded video at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and people were under the impression that we were live then. So it was funny going for the chat and seeing people trying to interact with us, but it must have looked like we were ignoring them, but we weren't. We weren't live. It was a pre-recorded video. Next week we will be live. So thank you very much to everybody who's joined us. I am not yapping because I'm not prepared for the outro. I promise that isn't the case. I finally found it. Thank you very much. We will see you all next week. And of course, ignore what I said about David Coote. I was joking. I love David. I'd love to have him on the show. And we will see you all next